4 kids, 3 fathers, and none of them are birth certificate fathers.
Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I'm your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for Not Parent Expected or Non-Paternal Event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. Welcome to episode 66. And today I would like to start with an article I read last night in Severance magazine. Severance magazine is an online magazine. You can find it at severancemag.com. It's a magazine for NPEs, which is a term pertaining to misattributed parentage resulting from situations such as formal or informal adoption, kidnapping, undisclosed step-parent adoption, paternity fraud, donor-assisted conception, non-consensual sex, and most commonly, an extramarital affair. And I'm that last one. I'm a NPE from a one-night stand, an extramarital affair. But this magazine is for people like me and like my guest today. But I wanted to talk briefly about this article. The article is called Q&A with Investigator Christina Bryan. And depending on what point in the future you're listening to this podcast, this article is from January 5th, 2021. So I found something in this article that I just wanted to quick point out to everyone before we get to our guest, because I thought this was a good little piece of information. Let me scroll down till I find it. Okay, so Christina Bryan, she's actually the co-host of Sex, Lies, and the Truth, but she's being interviewed here in this article, and she is a family investigator, and she gave a quick piece of information for people that are trying to reach out to brand new family members and how to do that. The question is, let me find this. How do you advise clients to go about contacting any biological relatives you find? And she responds, I recommend sending a snail mail letter sent via FedEx with a signature required. The direct adult signature required option. If you choose the FedEx indirect signature option, it may go to a neighbor if the addressee is not home. And then she talks a little bit about the uncertainty around email and social media messages. And I'll stop there, though, just to point out that that was a great idea. I've heard other guests talk about sending certified letters, but this one was through FedEx, a letter sent with a signature required. So if you are in that process right now, reaching out to maybe your biological father, maybe a new half-sibling, that would be an option you want to consider. That is not the option I took. I just, in my shock, quickly sent out an email and messages, and that was just where my brain was that day 1.5 years ago. But for someone who's putting a little more thought into it, that might be helpful for them. All right. And now for today we are setting time aside to listen to Beth's story. Hi, Beth. Are you there?
Hi, Lily. Yes, I'm here.
Thank you very much for being willing to share your story today.
Sure. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you.
I was looking over your email, and I was really sad to find out you and most of your siblings have recently found out you are all NPEs with different dads. Is that true?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. Through an ancestry test or 23andMe?
Yes, I was the first one to do the ancestry and, realized the results, and then I shared it with my siblings, and they also had different results. So it's quite an experience.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so take me back, if you don't mind. Let me know a little bit about your original family, and also if you could tell me where you're from, what year you're born. I could just kind of get an idea, a sense of your life then.
Oh, sure. I actually was born in 1966 on the East Coast from the DC area, and I'm 54 years old right now. Um, I grew up, and the family, so I really look at everything. I still have the same family, like I still have the same parents, I still have the same siblings. So, um, I still refer to them as my parents and my siblings, my sisters and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But basically, I'm the oldest of four children. I am a little bit older, so we were kind of spaced out. I was an only child for 6 years, and then my second sister came along, and then the others followed after her. But basically, kind of a middle class family. I do kind of recall, as a child, my parents argued a lot. My mother drank a lot, like she was an alcoholic. So I always knew that, it was kind of a tough environment, because they were always yelling at each other. My dad would get upset at me, that sort of thing. But then, my second sister came along 6 years after me. So that was kind of nice. Then I had somebody else to, take care of. And, I would, always kind of babysit her. 2 years after she was born, another sister was born. And then 2 years after that, another sister was born. So there's about 10 years between me and the youngest. But, I grew up kind of always taking care of them. After the third sister was born, my mom, I guess, kind of realized that she was an alcoholic and she was able to get help. So she started going to AA meetings. She really started spending time and, getting sober, and, that really became a big part of her life. My dad would go to Al-Anon meetings. So, there was a lot of, it started getting a little bit more calm, like there was more kids, but at least, between my parents, it seemed like, it was getting a little bit better and, not too crazy, kind of calmed down a little bit. My dad, was adopted. And so me and my sisters, didn't always look alike. As kids, we kind of joked. One of the four of us has red hair. One of the four of us kind of has blondish hair and she sort of tans. And then the other two are, brown hair and fair skin. And, so there was always kind of a oddness about us. We always actually would even joke, oh, you're from the mailman. You're from the milkman. Like it was always, something that we kind of recognized. But because my father was adopted and we didn't know his background, like that was sort of the reason, right? It was kind of like, okay, well, you look like mom and you look like mom, but the other two, maybe they're from dad's side. And that's why one of them has brown skin and, whatever, right? I mean, it was just kind of like a joke almost, right? We didn't have any idea at that time, that there was anything other than just dad's adopted, so that also, I think, kind of framed, a lot of the way sort of I looked at like heritage. I see a lot of things today with people in the NPE groups where heritage, is kind of a big part of their lives. I didn't really have that, right? Because there was so much I didn't know about my father since he was adopted. I knew my mother's side, and you could certainly look at me and say, oh yeah, she's probably, European or, Irish or English, something like that. It just, that all kind of made sense. But I didn't have like a strong connection to any certain, country or heritage. It just wasn't, wasn't really part of it. And even growing up, my last name, people would say, oh, your last name, you must be Irish or you must be British or whatever. And I'm like, well, yeah, maybe, but that's not really my last name because my dad was adopted, so that just was a constant, part of my life. And I think that also, not having that real knowledge, about what the heritage was, that sort of actually helped me once I much later found out about the NPE status. I think it just, made things a little bit more easy for me. When I was in high school, I actually got pregnant. I was a junior in high school, and I got pregnant, and in the middle of kind of towards the end of the school year, it was becoming very noticeable. And so they took me out of school, and I was able to finish the last couple months of my junior year at home. I guess it was before homeschooling, but the teachers would send home the work assignments, so I would be able to stay, on track and everything. I was raised Catholic, so I went to Catholic grade school. We went to church every Sunday, and I think pretty much a combination of being Catholic and having my father be adopted. It was a pretty easy decision for me to have my child be placed for adoption, which is what I did. So my daughter was born in August between junior and senior year of high school. And so I gave birth and I placed her for adoption. I never really knew much about where she was going. It was back in the 80s, and so it was a closed adoption. I got a little bit of information, like the parents were teachers. They lived in one of the states kind of nearby. But I didn't really know much more than that, right? So, so I placed her for adoption and basically gave birth. And then a couple weeks later, I went back and I finished my senior year of high school. So that was a little strange. It's not something that normally kids do over summer break. Have a child, give birth, and go through the whole adoption thing. But it all worked out, and I was able to finish high school on time. After that experience, though, it was always, I was always a little bit, I didn't quite fit in as much, right? Because it was such an experience that was changed, the way that I was and the way that I saw my other classmates at school. They were just kids. I mean, like I just went through this whole kind of transformation. It was quite a difficult time. But I was able to finish high school, and then I was able to get accepted to a college. And the college was in another state, several hours away from, where I grew up. And I was so happy to get out and just go away, away from the kids I went to school with, kind of away from all my sisters. It was just, I was very happy and very glad to go to this school that was, away from my family. That said, I went a little crazy, and I also started using drugs and alcohol. It was, a combination, I guess, of just being free and, having this opportunity to kind of do whatever I wanted to do. And somewhere along the way, one of my teachers, I went to a small school, and one of the teachers had kind of heard that I was doing a lot of partying and that kind of thing. And so I actually started going to AA meetings myself in college, because I already kind of had that background about like where to get help and kind of what to do. So in the middle of college, I started going to AA, and I actually got sober and have been sober since. So it was just, again, like a kind of a crazy time, but it all worked out. I was able to graduate on time, finish my schooling, and that was great.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
In your sobriety.
Yeah. It's been a long time, but that was good.
Wow.
So that's basically kind of where I come from. That is a lot of like what shaped my life. And that's the beginning.
And how did you find out you were an NPE?
Well, so we flash forward to 2017. when I started seeing the ads for Ancestry DNA, and it was kind of a, a new thing. I started hearing more about it and learning. So I actually got the Ancestry DNA test as a gift for my father for Father's Day because he was adopted. I thought, well, this will be great. We can find out the heritage. I didn't really know what Ancestry DNA did, right? I mean, my knowledge today is so far beyond what it was, in 2017. I literally thought, oh, we'll just find out, where we're from or what the heritage is. That was it. So I got him a test. I did a test myself and put him on the same account. And so I helped my dad. I was sort of the manager of his account. And so when I found some connections, because he never knew anything about his biological family, he did have a name of his birth mother and his birth father. He had names for those people, but that was pretty much it. And I think he had a general, area of the country where he was raised. So I was able to find a relative of his who actually had heard stories about his birth mother. She was sent away, and it was really a very terrible situation in the family. And, she had heard about it. So I was able to help my dad. We were able to talk to this woman on the phone about, the family and what happened. And it was a really good thing for my father. It was just so nice for him, I think, to have some sort of connection to some people, that knew a little bit about his family. I remember I sent an email to my sisters because I got my information. I said, oh, we're, 50% Irish and we're 55% British and, Scottish or whatever the percentages were, right? So I remember sending it out to my sister saying, hey, look at this, now we know. And that was it, right? That was 2017. So in 2018, I have a cousin, and he mentioned to me that he was showing a town in Ireland that was on his ancestry DNA. And one other thing that I forgot to mention earlier is that I actually have been reunited with my daughter that I had placed for adoption. I actually got to meet her in 2005. And we have since had a very wonderful relationship. She actually moved to be closer to me, and we have a really good relationship now. She just has two moms, and that's kind of the way it is. So we've gotten that all, worked out and everything. But my daughter had actually done the Ancestry DNA as well because she wanted to learn about her heritage. So this Easter Sunday, when I went to Ancestry DNA, it was the first time that I realized I wasn't connected to my dad. I saw my daughter. She was there as a connection, shows parent-child. I think by this time my mom had done the test, so I see the parent-child with her, but there's no connection to my father. And I thought, well, this is strange. Like, maybe because he's adopted. Like, I just still didn't quite understand what all this meant, right? I just didn't realize it. So I remember on Monday morning, I called Ancestry DNA, which I'm sure a lot of people have done. You get this information. It's like, what the heck's going on? So I called Ancestry and I just said, I have this, my father, I manage his account, but I just don't see that we're connected. And the woman on the phone says, well, you might want to talk to your mom. And I was like, what? Like, it was just the craziest thing. I mean, I'm going through this in my mind. I have to mention also, my parents are still married to this day. They've been married, over 60 years now. They're still together. And I was like, shocked. I mean, I just didn't understand. Like, my whole brain just ran through all these things. I started, looking on the internet. I was Googling stuff, just trying to understand what was happening. I didn't know. And then I was spending more time on Ancestry, and I was seeing all these names that I didn't know who they were. And they were not on my father's page, because I could go between the two, my results and his results. And no, these people aren't on his, and well, here they are on mine. So it was kind of just such a shock. I mean, just, I can't explain what I was going through mentally, and I was like, well, I have to talk to my mom. And we've always been very close because I'm the oldest. I just think my mom and I have always had, a pretty good relationship. So I go to her home the next weekend, and I say, hey, let's go for a drive. I got her in the car, and, we're driving around, and I said, hey, Mom, I did that Ancestry DNA thing. I said, I'm not connected to Dad. I said, do you have any idea, why that would be? He's not showing as my father. Oh, she says, those tests are always wrong. That can't be right. And I was like, really? I didn't think they were wrong. How could that be? So we didn't really talk more about it. It kind of just, I was like, okay, if that's what you think, I'll drop it at that. And it was after that meeting with my mom, I realized, well, I'm just going to have to figure this out myself, right? I'm going to have to just dig in and find out what's going on. And so that really was kind of the beginning of my search. I had nothing really to go from. I just started, looking at the information. I had a couple second cousins. I don't think I had anything closer than a second cousin. And there was 2 second cousins, a man and a woman. And I remember emailing both of them through Ancestry. And I said, hi, I'm Beth. I was born, in DC around this time. I think that we might be related, but I'm not quite sure. It seems that I don't know who my father is. I just tried to give as much information as I could, but really didn't know what much to say. And the man never responded. And the woman finally responded. She doesn't always check the Ancestry DNA. And I will say that that's a common theme that I found out, is that, Ancestry DNA, a lot of people don't have their notifications on or email or whatever, so you don't always quite get responses very quickly. But this one woman, said, sure, I'll talk to you. And she gave me her phone number. She got on the phone with me, and I kind of talked through the situation. I explained my age and my parents' ages, and I just told her it's probably somebody, in their late 70s, early 80s. We're showing as second cousins, so maybe it's somebody related. I had to go through the whole, where they have the, I think it's the CMs numbers.
Yes.
And so you can kind of get an idea of how you're related to somebody based on the value that is shown in Ancestry DNA. So I started, kind of going through what the numbers meant and what's a second cousin. And so I was trying to share this with the woman. She didn't really know much about Ancestry DNA either. But she just kind of started going through, and she said, well, it's either this guy or this guy. And, found out that it was, in fact, one of the people that she thought. It was my father, and he was in the same DC area around the same time. It was her first cousin. And in that family, this woman that I was talking to was the youngest of the cousins, and she actually was about my age. And my biological father was the oldest of the cousins. It's a pretty big family. So there literally was like this, 30-year age difference, And so that helped me, kind of start piecing things together. and the information that she shared, she talked to me about the family, what he did. I did all the searches. He didn't come up anywhere on the internet. Wasn't on Facebook, wasn't anywhere, right? But she was able to get a hold of some of her family and was able to get an address for me. And so and kind of as you mentioned at the start of this podcast today, I sent a letter with the U.S. mail, but it was one of those overnight, where you had to sign for it, right? And I wrote a card, what I thought was a very nice card, and included a picture of me and my daughter, because that would be, his daughter and his granddaughter, and tried to explain. I knew where my mother was working at the time that she got pregnant with me. And she was drinking a lot. I remember as a child hearing she used to work in a bank, and, they would go out. She used to tell me Friday nights, they'd go for some drinks after work. And so it's kind of interesting that ended up, being the factor of where everything happened. And so I sent this letter, and I didn't get a response. That was the end of 2018. It was around October by the time I kind of figured everything out, and there was no response. And I thought, okay, I'll just wait. I had gone through therapy, so I did contact a counselor when all of this first started, to really kind of help me, deal with the shock of all this. At the time I was, 52 or 53 years old, and never thought anything. My parents, as I said, were still together. So the therapist really helped me, and she helped me write the letter. I shared with her what I was thinking about doing, and the therapist was able to provide some really good feedback and truly helped me, kind of piece it all together and make it a positive letter, right? I never asked for anything. I made it very clear. I'm not looking for anything. I said I would just maybe like some health information, very basic, right? I just told him I'm not looking for anything else. Just if you could share some information with me, I'd appreciate it. So then I tried again, like in the spring of the next year, which at that point would have been 2019. And I sent another card. And then sort of an interesting thing, I was in the same state as my biological father. I had to go there for work. And so I actually drove to his condo. I've never told anyone this. I drove to his condo, and it was one of those places where, where they have the mailboxes outside the door, and they have like names on each of the boxes.
Yes.
And yeah. I got there, and I go to the address that I had been sending. I had sent now 2 letters, and there's no name on the box. And I was like, oh, shoot, maybe I got the wrong address. I don't know. It's kind of a weird situation. So I contacted the cousin who helped me originally, and I just told her, I said, hey, I went to his place. It was kind of in the evening, so I didn't dare like knock on the door or anything like that. And she said, well, that's kind of strange. I'll maybe try to ask around some other family members. So they said, that was the address. Well, I found what is my aunt, my biological father's sister, found her on Facebook. And I actually messaged her on Facebook, and I just said, hi, I'm Beth. This is my situation. I think your brother might be my biological father. And I told her that I had sent 2 letters, but I haven't gotten a response. So I was just asking her if she could help, verify the address. That's all I asked for. I got a response in like 5 minutes. I was like shocked. I couldn't believe it. And so she actually got a hold of her brother and called him, and she responded to me and said, he has received your letters And he's actually on a vacation right now. He has an RV and he's out, going around the country. But he'll call you back in a couple months. Like he was going to be gone for like 6 weeks, so he was going to contact me after he got back. And I was floored. Like, thank you so much. I told her, I really appreciated everything she did. It was just amazing that I actually got a response. So after that, it was about maybe 2 weeks and he called me and I answered the phone, which is another kind of strange thing. I don't always answer numbers that I don't know who they are. Mm-hmm. And he says, Beth, this is James. And I said, oh, hello there. I was like, oh my God, I'm just dying on the phone. And he was very matter of fact. It's sort of funny because the cousin told me he's a grizzly bear on the outside, but he's a teddy bear on the inside. And, that was kind of a good thing to know because when he was on the phone, he was very serious. I hear about this. And he says, yes, I do remember your mother. She worked at the bank. Well, he was a customer, I later found out. And so I said, oh, yes, thank you. Thank you very much. He said that, he didn't know anything about me, but he would be willing to, talk more with me, after his trip is finished. I said, okay, thank you very much. I said, I have an extra ancestry test. How about I mail it to you? And then you can take that test and just, verify. Because he did question, wanting to make sure, to verify the DNA or, that kind of thing. He said, okay, that's fine. So I had sent the test, I mailed it to him and he had gotten back to his home. And he basically called me back and said he didn't want to do ancestry DNA because it was too public. He's very worried about all the information being out in the world and that kind of thing. And I said, okay. I said, I'm willing to come to see you to where you live, which is, we're very far away. We're on, kind of other opposite sides of the country. And so he arranged, we set a date. We were going to meet in October. I brought my husband with me and he arranged to have a DNA place, like a, regular DNA testing site, that we would go to and do the test. So when I arrived, I told him I was there. He came to the hotel and picked up me and my husband, and I met his lady friend. He's 82 years old or 83 years old and had, started a relationship with this woman, had just like the year before. So it was quite interesting. And so the four of us, get in the car. He drives us to the DNA site and we get there and we do the test. And that was like, 10 o'clock in the morning. And we said, okay, we'll just spend the rest of the day together. And we're driving around and we're going to different places. And, we had lunch and, he took us around to some areas, around his home. And kind of at the end of the day, we get back to the hotel. He says, well, I think you just wasted $100. And I said, really? He says, well, yeah, of course you're my child.
Oh.
Because throughout the day, as we're talking, and it was really good for me to have my husband. I'm sorry. It was really good to have my husband because I was like, I get kind of quiet, like I just take everything in. And my husband was able to converse, with my biological father. And there were so many similarities. And so at the end of the day, and he says, "Oh, you have my blue eyes. You must be mine." So it was just, you know, it's such a good response. It was like, I couldn't believe it. Like, and the things that we did have in common, like a lot of our personalities are similar. It was just amazing. And so, that was at the end of the day, and we said our goodbyes. And then we said, okay, well, we'll see each other tomorrow. I was going to be leaving, I think the next day. We still had part of the next day. And he invited me to his home because up until this point, he was very cautious, right? He only gave me a cell phone number. He never, shared much more personal information. But the next day, he, gave me directions to his house. We drove to his home. We went inside. He showed me, some family pictures, went through a lot of different information. I was very careful about the questions that I asked because I didn't want to push him away in any sense. Like I didn't want to ask too many questions, but just get a little bit information of kind of, how did he meet my mom? Like he did say he knew her, that kind of thing. Like I got some of that information. I didn't get a whole lot of information about their relationship. His lady friend was there the whole time, so I didn't, want to get into that too much. But it was just a really nice introduction to each other. It was just a way for us to say, okay, we think we have a connection. Let's kind of see what happens. And so I, basically left after, the next day, and that was kind of, the visit. I did find out that he had 2 other children. So he was married at the time that he was with my mother. My mother, of course, was married, and he had 2 sons from his first wife. And I guess he got together with my mom or whatever, and he ended up divorcing his first wife and ended up raising his 2 sons on his own. So he had kind of a rough time with that. And I don't quite know the whole story around there. I think obviously he was cheating on his wife. And I found out later that he was cheating with other women as well. So, that probably was a lot of it. I did also just kind of wanted to mention the lady friend that he has now. I found out later that he didn't respond to me because he didn't quite know what to do. He had just started this relationship with this woman, and I think he was, to a certain extent, very ashamed of what had happened and the relationship, and he didn't really want to, say anything to her. And I found out later that when the sister contacted him, the lady friend was with him because they were in the RV and they were traveling. And so it was at that point that he had to tell her. And she said, of course, of course a child wants to know where they're from. So it was her support for both of us that really helped. And I always say, when people are asking, about contacting people, I hate to be, I don't know. I just have found good results with women. I think all the people that helped me were women, right? My cousin, my aunt, the lady friend, so I think that there's just sort of a natural connection and a natural way of wanting to help somebody. I hate to generalize, but I'll just say in my situation, that was very helpful. That was something that, really, really helped me a lot. Just to kind of continue, after that visit, I did get confirmation from the DNA place that he was my biological father. And so I did send him the results. And that, that kind of sealed the deal, if you will, right? I mean, I think we had this initial, like, there's a lot here, but then when we got the DNA results, then we just really kind of started a new relationship. It was, something that was very, very positive for us. We have since seen each other one more time. I went out last year, and I'm actually going to go out and see him again next month, even during this difficult time. I know it's probably not supposed to be traveling, but he's 83 years old, and I, really want to be able to spend as much time with him as I possibly can. So I'm going to be going out there again and being able to spend some time and visit with he and his lady friend. So that's been very positive.
Do you think you will ever meet your brothers?
Yes. So last summer when I went out there, I met one of my brothers. And it's kind of funny because, I used to be the oldest child and now I'm the youngest. The two brothers are older than me. I have two older brothers now. And one of the older brothers is a little bit estranged from my biological father. They don't get along too well, and they're several states away from each other. So I haven't had the opportunity to meet him. But when I went out there last summer, I got to meet my brother and two of my aunts, his two sisters. And that was kind of interesting. I mean, he was so excited to have a younger sister, because he was the youngest and he didn't, my brother, he didn't have any younger siblings. It was interesting because we don't really have a lot in common, I have to say, me and my brother. He never went to college. He really didn't pursue a career. I'm much more like my biological father in that sense. Like, I'm very driven. That was one of the things when I got to meet my biological father. Like, we're both, I call him a hard ass. We both kind of have that in common. Like, I've been working since I was 14, like, just always working and pushing and that kind of thing. Like, he always did that. He had two sons to support, all those years. And so I think he's surprised even that he and I have so much in common. Sometimes he says we have more in common than the two boys that he raised, So it's been good. So the brother and I, we still communicate. We text a lot, and we'll call every now and then and just talk on the phone and that kind of thing. So that's been a very nice connection.
Nice. Now, how about your parents? You said they've been married for 63 years at least. How is that? How did that go with your mom and your birth certificate father?
It's so weird. I just can't explain to you. So I did go back to my mom and shared with her all of this. Like, I wasn't telling my mom when I was doing all of this connection, right? When I was searching, when I found him, I never didn't tell my mom. It wasn't until this past summer, when I got to meet him again and got a little bit more information, that kind of thing. So I went back to my mom and I told her, I said, this is his name. This is where he worked. This is what I've been told. And she still says, I don't remember anything. She's complete denial. I did ask a few questions. I said, does dad know? No, dad has no idea. Okay. He never knew anything. And she even said it was sort of strange because she was still, sleeping with her husband. So the way she says it is she never really knew and she never really questioned, right? My parents actually had been married 8 years before she got pregnant with me. So obviously my father, had some trouble. He never really was able to, make a child. And so she just said, she just never really questioned. She was just happy to have a child. She was just so happy to get pregnant. But she basically has been in denial. And I haven't said anything to my father. He's 84 years old, and there's really no reason for him to find out. I mean, I'm not going to be the one to tell him, and it's just something that is just not discussed. I mean, basically, as far as that goes, I still, see my parents. I take care of them. You know, it's just not discussed. We just don't talk about it. Yeah.
I got it. What and your other sisters that you said a few more of your younger sisters have also found out their NPEs? Are they also just going to? Everyone just kind of decided not to talk to your
nobody talks to
your
dad.
father?
Nobody says anything to our dad. That's certainly not. So basically, after I kind of found out about my situation, I told one of my sisters, and I got tests for all three sisters. I sent them all tests, and what we found out is that the two in the middle actually have the same father, so they're full siblings.
Oh,
they're 2 years apart, and I guess my mom must have had a long-term relationship with their biological father. And the youngest sister, her biological father, when she got her results, a very familiar name popped up. So her father was my mom's AA buddy. And I remember the man. He was at my first wedding. He was at my sister's wedding. He was a part of the family, like just around. He had a wife and children, but he and my mom were very close, obviously.
yeah.
And I guess they had been carrying on, for many years. And that was kind of tough, I think, because in my mind, I always thought, well, maybe the three of us, because my mom was still drinking, like it kind of made sense that, okay, she's drinking and she's fooling around and, okay, I can handle that. But when it came to the last one and it was a family friend, I don't know, that just was so strange to me. Like I just couldn't imagine my mother had been cheating on my father. Like, I don't know. It just, it was a tough situation. But the sisters, so another sort of ironic twist to all of this is the fathers are all deceased.
Oh.
So I'm the only one. I'm the oldest. I'm the only one that has a father that's still alive.
Oh, so all your siblings are from different dads. No one has your birth certificate father as their biological?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't make that clear.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, 4 kids, 3 fathers, and none of them are birth certificate father, who is still husband today.
Yeah. I can't share this, but I looked at the picture you sent me of you with your sisters. And yeah, I mean, you've got a redhead, a brunette, a blonde. I mean, they look, you don't look related. I think maybe 2 of them kind of did, but yeah.
I know. Isn't it strange?
Yeah.
And, even growing up, like I said, it was just sort of a joke. Like, we didn't think anything of it. We didn't know at the time. And then finally, now that we know what we know, it's like so many things start to make sense, like why we all look different. And even the 2 in the middle that are actually full sisters, they don't quite look that much alike. So that's, been kind of a strange situation. They have not done much searching. One of them got in touch with a first cousin, but that was really about it. They just haven't been very interested. But like the youngest sister, she's totally gotten into the whole thing, especially because she's the one that has the father that we know the family. And so she got in touch with her half siblings, and, she's gone to the family reunion. She's been in touch with them. She's much younger than her half siblings. And so, that's been, a fairly good situation for her, to have that, acceptance and those relationships, with her half siblings. So, that's been pretty positive.
Beth, I should mention at this point that if anyone wants to reach out to you, that they can just do so through the podcast. And I will make sure and pass anything along and respect your anonymity and your family's. But they just want to email npestories@gmail.com, Beth's story, episode 66. And Beth, do you have anything else you'd like to share today?
No, I just, really want to thank you. I just, one quick thing I wanted to just mention real fast is I know a lot of people are talking about, birth certificate father and biological mother and things like that. And for me personally, because I have been in the situation where I'm a birth mother, my daughter has two mothers and I have two fathers. And it's just, I figure the more love you can get, the better. So, I really am very happy to have multiple parents. I might not be happy with some of their decisions or their responses, but they're still, parents. So that's all. I'm very happy to talk to anybody. If there's any questions, certainly open to that.
Thank you again, Beth, for sharing today. These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.